doing things properly. Okay. So, the course is about the practice of strategic management. It's about the methods that are used by managers to make strategy happen by forming projects and programs to implement strategy, responding to changes in the external environment and internal capabilities, anticipating and preparing for those kind of changes through contingency planning. It's about designing organizations that are appropriate for strategy and that facilitate the implementation of strategy, and building competences and capabilities to implement strategy effectively. We've learned over the years that the kind of capabilities and skills required to form strategy in the first place are much different than the skills that are required to make strategy happen, to implement strategy. Forming strategy is very exciting intellectually. It's the kind of stuff that senior executives love to do, and it's intellectually stimulating. Implementing strategy, on the other hand, sometimes just comes down to plain old hard work. And how we get people to engage in that hard work, that sustained, vigorous effort to make strategy happen, requires a set of competences and capabilities that are much different than those required to form strategy in the first place. And we're just coming to realize those differences today in the strategic planning profession. And it makes a great deal of difference. It turns out that companies that have those abilities and that are effective, have effective implementation methods, do a great deal better financially, as well as in their strategic planning to make, to realize the objectives and to achieve the goals in their plans. So implementing strategy turns out to be just as important as forming it in the first place. So this is the second part of the two-part program in strategic management here at the Tillman School. The first part you should have already been through, and the skills that you've learned are covered by those bullets that you see on the slide. So in this successor to Business 670, Business 671, we're going to talk about making it happen through practice by conducting a comprehensive assessment of a major corporation as it exists today, actually doing it. And so we'll be concentrating on the managerial tasks of crafting and implementing comprehensive strategies and plans. It's about the practice of strategic management, really doing it. And a fundamental theme, if you will, is that firms must have, they have to have managers with those skills to implement strategy if they're going to succeed. And again, this is the result of recent research, which is pointing out to us that one of the real pitfalls in strategic planning is the absence of implementation capabilities. So this course, just like Business 670, will sharpen your ability to think strategically, and it will do so in a different way than 670, through the mechanism of guided practice. We're going to jump right in and join in that project with you. So you'll practice the methods of gathering evidence, selecting goals, developing strategic objectives, forming strategies that you learned in 670. In addition, there will be some new material from your textbook on implementation, including organizational design for effective implementation, dealing with change management, and selecting operational tactics to make strategy happen. But throughout, we'll be talking about skills and practice, as well as integrating all that knowledge that you got in 670, and for that matter, other courses in your MBA curriculum. So the scope of the course, in as many words, is to the methods and procedures of strategy implementation, the operational tactics for making strategy happen, corporate governance, the responsibility of the board of directors and senior executives, not just to do things right, but to do the right things. And then, most importantly in this course, guided practice. I, and I hope other instructors, will jump right in to this project with you. We'll join the team. We won't do the work of the strategic assessment for you, but we'll certainly be willing to do it with you, help you get through the rough spots, make sure that you've got the right idea about how to proceed. So if you will, this is a course that is meant to be passed. You know, this project is a big part of your grade, as you'll see very quickly. And if you do well in that project, you're probably going to do well in the course. But it's going to take some real effort on your part. This is not the kind of thing that you can do in a leisurely fashion. You're really going to have to focus in on this project. But we'll be there with you to give you every opportunity to do well, because we want you to do well so that you can use these methods and procedures when you leave the course and move through your management career. The last item that we'll get into is contingency planning. And there's a separate lecture on contingency planning. Contingency planning is pretty much the state of the art in strategic planning. In the old days, we didn't have the ability to prepare for more than one set of environmental contingencies. The possibility that significant changes could occur in the economy, the marketplace, our industry, technology, the firm's organization, its abilities. Today we have a wonderful array of electronic techniques that enable us to do all this work that didn't exist in years gone by. But today, because we can plan for alternative futures, we can really reduce the risk of an enterprise if we do contingency planning well. The dirty little secret is that not a lot of companies do contingency planning well. So if you learn the portion of this course devoted to contingency planning, you'll have a very valuable skill that will be more and more valuable, and that corporations will learn more and more is valuable. And therefore you could be more valuable to your company. Okay, so what are our objectives? And in short order, they are for you to acquire essential strategic management skills, particularly in implementation and going through the process of strategic planning, and to practice the principles of strategic planning that you learned in Business 670, as well as this course. And those include learning techniques for forming contingency plans, to learn to select from alternative organizational designs. And again, something I think that is very important, as it was in Business 670, and that is to appreciate the dynamic nature of strategic management and the need to replan continuously. In the old days, that was so difficult. We didn't have electronic computers or even calculators. We didn't have internet. We didn't have email. You know, things were a lot slower then. And so the planning process was a sort of an annual drill. Today, we do it continuously because we have all these wonderful electronic tools that enable us to do strategic management dynamically. And that's so important because business conditions are changing so rapidly that we need this ability to keep our strategy up to date, to track the progress of all our implementation programs, to assess what's going on out there, and to take into consideration new economic forecasts, new market forecasts, new assessments of technology and so forth, and then based upon this information that comes to us all the time, update our strategy and update our implementation programs. We can do this today. Take it from an old man who did it the old way before these new tools occurred. It's like night and day. Back then, we couldn't do this stuff. Now, what we can do leaves us old timers in your dust. You know, you've got capabilities that when I was practicing strategic manager and as a vice president of corporate planning, and I didn't have at my disposal. Fortunately, by the time I was managing a consulting firm that specialized in strategic planning, we had a lot of these new tools and we used them. And it was marvelous that we were able to accomplish so much more with these new tools that you almost take for granted today. So much more than we could in the past. So this makes it possible for top management to do a lot more and to manage in a much different fashion than in the past. And so it's appropriate to reflect on the strategic concerns of top management. You know, what kind of concerns does top management have about the quality of plans, the quality of management to implement plans, and the quality of the firm's thoughts about alternative futures. All of this will come up in the course that you are now beginning. Okay, so our approach, very simply, is to have some lectures as before, as in 670. This lecture is on the introduction to the course. There's no quiz on it. But there are two lectures, one on implementation methods and procedures, the other on contingency planning. There will be quizzes on those. Frankly, there's another lecture which is on the methods of going through the project. There's no quiz on it either, but when we get to the schedule, you'll see there's actually another lecture in there. But it has nothing to do with what you'll be graded on. It's just some guidelines. And there will be reviews of 4 chapters in the textbook that you did not read in Business 670. There will also be mini cases, just as in 670. These are these little vignettes, little 2 or 3 page summaries of how a company encountered one of the principles in the chapters that you're reading, and how that company dealt with the challenges that it faced then. Very important to appreciate from that perspective how strategy is implemented and how strategy actually turns out, how it happens. So these mini cases are very valuable exercises. And of course, you're going to be asked to write a little paper, a very short paper, 2-3 pages, just to answer a question about that issue that this company faced. There will be tests. There will be a quiz on each of those 2 lectures. I might add that initially, those 2 lectures were all part of one lecture. It's actually one big lecture, but I decided to break it into 2 parts just so that the lecture wouldn't be so long. So the part that deals with implementation methods and procedures is one part, and then the implementation of contingency planning, which is really part of implementation. You know, getting ready for what might happen is part of the strategic planning process now. But I've separated that part out just so you can take a little time off between those two parts. But we'll have these mini cases. We'll have the tests on the quizzes, on the 2 lectures and the 4 chapters. There will be these little papers that you'll submit on the mini cases. There will be 2 tests. One will be on the 4 chapters and the 2 lectures. The other will be on will be a final exam, which will be based on the project that you and your teammates do, as well as the projects that other teams do. And the exam will be based on the principles of strategic management that are demonstrated by those presentations. Okay, so very simply, what do you have to do to succeed in this course? 1, you have to pass the quizzes. 2nd, you have to do a good job on those mini case papers. 3rdly, and probably most importantly, you have to do a good job on that team project, and you will see that there's a lot involved in that. It's a very heavy portion of your grade. And then finally, another heavy portion is the 2 tests. One on the chapters and the lectures, and the other the final exam on the presentations. So here's how the grade, your grade, will be calculated. There will be quizzes on 4 chapters and 2 lectures, but you can see that they will account for only 10% of your grade. That's very important. The purpose of a quiz is not to assess your performance in the course, not at all. The purpose of a quiz is simply to serve as a learning aid. After you take the quiz, you look at your results and find out what you didn't get right, and then go back and fill in those gaps. If you do, when you get to taking the test, which is meant to assess your performance, you should do pretty well. But if I had my way, there wouldn't be any points on quizzes at all. The only problem is then you wouldn't take them. The quizzes are there with a very small weight. Let's say that your average score is a C. That would be a 75. I certainly hope you'll do better than that. But if you got an average of 75, that would mean that you'd get 7.5 out of 10 points, which would mean that your maximum attainable score in the course would be 97.5, still a solid A. So the quizzes are not meant to measure your performance. They're there to help you learn the material in this course. There are these 4 discussion questions. Again, only 10 points. The test on the principles, another 10 points. But altogether, those first 3 items are 30%, so they're starting to add up. The team projects that are referred to here are the 3 weeks of work that you will do on the project to assemble it. And you will see later in this review that in each week there are specific tasks for you and your teammates to do. And you're going to be graded on those tasks. And once again, every part will be worth 10 more points. It's kind of a boring repetition here. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. The team presentation is worth twice as many. It's worth 20 points. And the final exam, again, is worth 20 points. So what we try to do is break this thing up between the principles, if you will, and the assessment, and if you will, theory and practice. Although the theory in this case is methodology, as opposed to theory in Business 670. Okay, so let me run through now exactly how the course will unfold. So in week 1, which we're in now, you'll have this. I hope you are paying attention to this course introduction. And in this first week, there will be 2 lectures. As I mentioned, lectures 1 and 2 originally were all part of one lecture. And I've simply broken them apart so that you can take a break in between them. Lecture 3 is not, there's nothing, no quiz on it. It simply contains some guidelines for conducting the project that you will do later in the course, and gives you enough information to get started with your teammates on gathering information about the company that you're going to study. And I might add, that's very important. You don't wait for week 4 to get going. You start right away to gather information about the company that you and your teammates select. So the next item under lecture 3 on this slide is to form teams and select the company that you and your teammates are going to study. There is a quiz on lectures 1 and 2, which is really all one, as I said before. There also is a mini case. In fact, there is not a mini case. That's incorrect, because the chapter work starts next week. So let me fix that right now, and that way I won't have to worry about it. Boy, look at me. I'm not a very good stenographer, am I? And again, I need to just fix this. Pardon me for just a second, and I'll just do a little bit of maintenance work here, and I'll save that change. The nice thing about Zoom is that you can actually edit the slides, and you're actually editing the slides in your computer. They're not out in cyberspace somewhere. So that I've now corrected this slide when you look at it again. And of course, these slides certainly will be on your Moodle shell, and I hope you will refer to them as often as you feel the need. So let's see if we can get here to weeks number 2 and 3. In weeks 2 and 3, we'll be talking about implementation methods and procedures, but this is the methodology. This is the stuff that's in your textbook that we're going to go over 4 chapters. In week number 2, we're going to be talking about organizational design. Chapter 12 is about designs for companies that are engaged in just one industry. They're in a single business. Don't be fooled, though. We're not talking about a candy store. We're talking, these can be corporations like Dow Chemical and U.S. Steel, Intel. Just because a company is engaged in just a single industry and as a single business doesn't mean that it can't be a real large corporation. But how we organize single business corporations is different from the way we go about organizing multi-business corporations. And so there are 2 separate chapters on those methods. And as usual, there will be a quiz on each chapter and a mini case on each chapter. To be very candid with you, this is not a difficult week. And that's by intent. During this week, you and your teammates ought to be getting together and figuring out how you're going to go about gathering information regarding the company you've chosen. In Business 670, you learned all the techniques to do it. Going out to Business Week, Forbes, Fortune magazine, The Economist magazine, to websites and so forth, and gathering information about the company, about the relevant economy, the company's markets, and its industry structure. You can you can be gathering all of this and at least planning your work. And so there should be time in week 2 for you to get going on that. Week 3 is the same kind of week, but it's got one added feature. There's a test at the end of week 3, so that makes it a little more challenging. Chapter 4, we skipped in Business 670. The authors call it a chapter on operational strategy. It's not strategy at all. If you learned what strategy is in Business 670, strategy is all the work and concept that management intends to achieve its goals and its rationale for selecting the approach to be taken rather than alternatives, right? So it's not operational, it's not tactical. Strategy is not tactical. But we need to have operational tactics. We need to have the skills to deploy and employ the resources entrusted to us as managers so that we can make strategy happen. That's what chapter 4 is for. So now we're going to read chapter 4. The final chapter, the appropriate close to the textbook portion of the course, is chapter 11. And I think the authors just got chapter 11 out of sequence. They just didn't think it through right. But it's a chapter on corporate governance. It's the appropriate way to wind things up here. You know, corporate governance is about the directors and senior managers making difficult decisions sometimes, not just on doing things right, but doing the right things. And that sometimes is a little dicier question than we usually think it is. But this chapter deals with some of those issues. There is a great mini case in this chapter about how somebody overlooked the rules for doing the right things. And I think you'll find that to be a very interesting mini case. And then at the end of the week, there will be a test on what has happened in these first 3 weeks. And all of this is about the methodology of implementation that has not been discussed in Business 670. So this takes us to week 4. And frankly, to weeks 4 through 6, where we break down the work of this strategy implementation project. We break it down into 3 weeks, and real life is broken down finer than that. And the responsibility for doing these things is usually delegated to several managers and management groups throughout the enterprise. But now it's just you and your teammates. So good luck. Week 4, you're assembling the background. That is the firm's history, a summary of the products and or the services that the company offers to its customers, its mission, and its perception of how the firm will look when the mission either is being accomplished or has been accomplished. That is the vision. There's so much to know about mission and vision that most people have no idea about. These terms are badly used in normal vernacular, and when we get to week 4, I'm going to share some thoughts with you about what is involved. And I believe also in that first lecture on implementation, you'll get some of my thoughts on mission and vision. I want to add one more comment, and that's about firm history. That sounds like something that is dry and not too important. Boy, is that wrong. The idea of assembling the firm's history is to lay out over time how this firm has grown to be the firm that it is today. What key milestones, what key turning points were encountered. And as you go through the rest of the assessment, when you're talking about the firm's selection of strategy, and strategic objectives for low cost or differentiation, or a strategy for product development, or to move into new markets. Those, to illustrate those decisions, you're going to refer back to the history. So this history section has to spell out enough of those key turning points in the company's history so that it's obvious when you're doing the assessment exactly how and why a decision was made to select a particular strategic objective or a particular strategy. So this history is the foundation of the building that you're going to construct in this project. So the history turns out to be much more important than otherwise you would have imagined. And I want to offer that to sort of stick it in your brain right now, because people very often just don't pay enough attention to analyzing the firm's history and finding out just where those turning points were. Other material that you'll develop in week number 4, the first week of this project formally, will be to gather up all that economic and market information that you might have gathered in weeks 1 through 3, but to make your slides, to identify what economic forces have impinged on the firm's performance potential. The same for market forces. What's been going on out there among the community of buyers, what the sources of demand are, and how those sources again have influenced your firm's performance potential and the decisions that managers made. So week 4 is about gathering evidence. Week 5 is also partially about gathering evidence, because that's where we do the industry structure analysis and look at competition. So Porter's 5 forces analysis is done here. A BCG matrix belongs here. A financial comparison of the rivals in the industry belongs here. Again, in Business 670, you learned all those skills, so you should be able to jump right in on this. Also, in week 5, you take a look at the company's capabilities. So that requires a financial analysis, again, following those same principles that you learned in Business 670. You'll be provided with some evidence. Some financial sheets from an investment advisory service to make it a little easier for you to put this information together. I use Value Line, and so I'll be, if I'm your instructor, I'll be providing you with pages from the Value Line survey that just gives you a nice 10-year history of key financial information. We'll have to talk about how to derive some further information from what's on that sheet, but there are other sources that you can get similar information from. One very popular source is Standard & Poor's, which issues sheets on individual companies, and that also is a very good source. And that'll be up to your instructor. The capabilities analysis, in addition to financial trends, will include an assessment of functional strengths and weaknesses. That is to say, the firm's functional capabilities and how and whether they are stronger or weaker than competitors. And finally, the firm's organizational resources and organizational structure, whether the firm is well designed and well structured to implement strategy effectively. Week 6 then is where we take all this evidence from weeks 4 and 5 and bring it together and make some decisions about standards for success, goals, the objectives that those standards suggest for strategy, perhaps least cost, perhaps differentiation, perhaps for moving beyond existing markets, perhaps for realizing that we've about reached the maximum growth potential of a mature industry, and it's time for some diversification. I might add, we'll get that information from looking at the industry structure as well. So we'll be making decisions in week 6 about goals, strategic objectives, and strategy itself. And there's a lot of work in that, but this is the payoff. This is kind of fun, where you choose from the options that are available to you, and those options you, again, learned in Business 670. One of the things that you've got to do in week 6, I might add, is to build a goals hierarchy as you did in Business 670 and identify strategic priorities. It'll be that goals hierarchy that is the springboard into everything else that that takes place in that decision making. And so then finally in week 6, you and your teammates will make some decisions regarding implementation priorities. And those priorities include coming up with the names of projects, big important projects that would be used or have been used to implement strategy. Acquisitions and mergers and divestments might be included here. Big cost reduction programs, implementation of new or development of new products, moving into new markets. Not the idea of it, not the concept, that's strategy, but what was actually done or what actually should be. What are these projects? Could be finding a new chief executive or identifying successors. If your company hasn't identified a good chief executive, a successor to the chief executive, and your current chief executive is in his mid or her mid 60s or over 65, and there's no obvious successor, that could be a big problem. When I worked with a team on the Apple case several years ago, that team had some real smart students in it. And in a work session, we decided that one of the things that Apple needed to do was think about a successor to the chief executive, Steve Jobs. And lo and behold, 2 years later, Steve Jobs was dead. Wow. Since Jobs has been gone, some would argue that Apple has not been the same. Its new product program hasn't been as vigorous or as enlightened as it was in the past. So maybe Apple is now in a new stage of its life, much different than when Jobs was there. Has Apple selected the right successor to Steve Jobs? What would the right successor be? How would you know? What kind of competences would that chief executive need to have? And so forth. Implementation priorities include the titles of the projects to be conducted and include the concepts of chief executive succession and the organization structure as a whole. How will this organization have to change to implement its current strategy successfully in the future? So that can be that's not a big topic, is it? Look at it, 2 words in week 6. It's a big topic, so you want to pay attention to it. And then in week 7, what it's all been for. You're on. It's your time. You're going to make a presentation with your team. That presentation will be video recorded, and everyone else in the course is going to watch it. It's going to be recorded because some people have to work at night. They won't be able to attend your presentation live, although they are certainly able to do so in Zoom. But if they can't, your presentation will be recorded and they can look at it later. After all the presentations are done, your instructor will have a review session with you to focus on the main principles of strategic management that were revealed by those cases. And guess what? Those are the same principles that you're likely to find in the final exam. Not to attend that lecture on the review would be a pretty major mistake, wouldn't it? But the final exam materials will be taken from those real presentations. And that's another reason that the instructor wants to work with you, to make sure that the presentation has plenty of quality. And we're going to judge your work in those first 3 weeks where you're putting the presentation together, and the presentation itself by its comprehensiveness, its completeness, and its correctness. So each of those 3 weeks, we're going to look at how complete the work was and how correct it was. We're going to make suggestions or criticisms if you haven't gotten it all right, so that you can clean them up and fix them up. Ideally, if you benefit from those critiques, then when you do your real presentation in this week number 7, there won't be much wrong, and it'll be a great presentation and you'll get a great grade. Then all we have to do is pay attention to each and every presentation, look at the PowerPoint slides, which will be put on the Moodle shell so everybody can review them. And after you've reviewed and studied those PowerPoint slides, you'll be ready to take the final exam, and the course will be over, just like this lecture. So the lecture is just about over. I hope, though, that this introduction or lecture has given you an idea of what will be involved in Business 671. As you can see now, it's very practice-oriented. It's intended to give you the tools of strategic management to go forth in your management career, be very successful, and make gobs of money, or at least have a good time. And so with that, I will say goodbye to you. If I can figure out how to get this thing to shut down for me. Let me see if I can do that. No, I'm having a little difficult time. There we go. With that, I will end this review. Wish you good fortune in this course, and I certainly look forward to meeting you again. Goodbye.